that the size of the type and even the relationship between the different kinds of type is fine on the screen and probably would still be fine in the real world. It's just that everything might be large. Usually the thing is it's larger than what you anticipate it to be. And so keeping the same relationship, but perhaps dropping back a point or two in size overall can make a huge difference. So printing out, if you have access to a home printer, and even if it's not in color, but printing out a version and thinking of it as a dummy is a helpful thing to do. Let's see. What else do I want to say in general here to begin with? I think the things that I'm finding myself comment perhaps the most on with the Seattle one, with the Seattle assignment, is looking at how lines break. So what I mean by that, I think most of you probably know, but let me just say it anyway. So what I mean by where lines break is where instead of just letting the text wrap like it normally does within a text box, but controlling line by line what is on the next line, where it returns. And that's usually, we're only doing that for things like headlines, subheadings, pull quotes, or to eliminate an orphan or widow. If, however, the way that you happen to be breaking up the text is in very, very short paragraphs, perhaps a sentence or two in length, and then that's one group, and then you go to another page. So that's a more poetic kind of presentation, which is perfectly appropriate for this book if you chose to go that way. So it's much less like running text that pretty much fills a page, and then I go to another one and fill the page. So that would be a normal, I suppose, presentation of a book for an adult audience. But because of the content on this one, some of you have paragraphs that, again, are quite short. So they fall in this kind of limbo land between a pull quote and an actual paragraph. And so for that reason, I'm encouraging you to look at how the lines break. And if it makes sense to, even if it's not to eliminate an orphan or a widow, but to group together the phrasing so that it makes the most sense. So let's say in Seattle, there's a phrase, something like, how's it go? To hear the wind and the, how's that phrase go? Hear the wind and the rain. I can't remember the first part. This is, I think you all know that part that's in the Seattle speech. So wind and the rain goes together, right? So even if I have room on the line above it to include the wind and then have just and the rain below it, what I'm suggesting is return the wind so that it's on the same line as the rain. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to, my point, I guess. So look for those kind of things. It's a fine-tuning thing. And so that's one of the things I've been finding myself commenting a little bit more the last couple of times, or individually with you guys. Let's see. Another one possibly is if you have text over the top of an image. And this is a very, very common issue that we need to try and solve. And so when we put text on top of an image, really what we're trying to decide between is which is more important. Are the words more important, or is the image more important? And many times by just having the image straight and put the text on top of it, it's kind of confusing. Which is more important? Is it the words or is it the text? And it comes across that way because the words are, yeah, I can kind of make out what it is, but it's not real clear. And when we look at the image, it seems like, well, I wish the words weren't there. I just want to see the picture. You know, so those kind of thoughts are going through our head when we see those two things. Now, on the other hand, let's say an easy example of of giving preference to one or the other would be, well, I'm going to still have text over the top of the image, but I'm going to make the image really light. So that's, of course, making the text more readable. So now it's obvious. Oh, I'm giving preference to the words, and the image is there in the background, truly in the background. Okay. So I guess my tip on this, because every image is different. Some have a lot of texture in them. Some is the same value as the color that you have on the text. All sorts of things, right? More details in the image or not. Everyone is different. So what I'm suggesting here as an approach is decide which, the image or the words, do you want to give priority to? Okay, and if you decide it's the text, that means you have to minimize the image somehow. Make it smaller, crop it, lighten it, change it to grayscale rather than color, something that diminishes the impact of the image. Now let's say, okay, all right, I get that, but I don't want to do that because the image is really a good picture. So then I think we're talking about perhaps thinking of a different location so that it is not competing with the text. That's the ultimate thing. Okay. Let's see. Those are my two or perhaps three things that I wanted to make sure I mentioned to all of you. I believe that all of you are in the kind of fine detail tweaking of things here. So what kind of questions or things are you working on that you want help with? Mariz, I think you can. I can tell. I can hear the wheel spinning. You're about to ask me a question.
Well, I was for my source. I had multiple authors, but it's from like the exact same website.
Okay.
And I was thinking, like, for my description, can I just describe the organization instead of each individual writer? Because there's like not much on them. Is
Yeah.
that
What's the organization?
they're called the NRDC.
Oh, NRDC. Yeah. Uh-huh. I'm
Yeah.
actually a member. Um, um, yes, you can. There's a couple of ways of crediting here, and absolutely you can credit it in the most general way of saying from the NRDC.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
I think each
Now,
of their names
yeah.
from the NRDC.
Now I have to also say that a more accurate credit would be from these authors, and you list their name from the NRDC.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, and I'm not saying that you have to do one or the other here, but I do need to point out that the more specific the citation, then the more credibility it has.
Yeah, like I have their individual names listed, but just like as a description, it's about the organization,
Oh,
not
I
them.
got. So you're thinking maybe there's two places in the description you list from NRDC, and perhaps someplace else you list the individual authors.
No,
Because
the
you could do that here. So
oh,
let's say for example on the cover it lists, you have your title of the book, and then you have I don't know, comments from Chief Seattle, comments from the NRDC.
mhm.
But then someplace else in the book you have a more complete citation credit to the individual authors.
Oh, okay.
So that's a possible example of what I'm referring to here. And again, you do not have to do both. It's just that there's an option, and that is a way to do it. And the reason for possibly doing it is that always, 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 the more specific the citation, the more credibility those words then carry.
Right.
Professor, you don't have to mention like what you just said. NRDC or whatever it was, you don't have to mention that on the, like for mine, I'm not mentioning the article on my cover. That's okay though?
Yes, so there's so many different ways here.
I'm mentioning the organization that wrote the article in the like kind of like an about section
Yeah,
about the different people, but then I'm listing the organization and then the names of the authors of within that section.
that's good.
Okay, because
Yeah.
I don't want to mention it on the, it'd be too long to put on my cover.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was trying
Okay.
to, in my example, I was saying just the organization on the front cover, not all the authors,
Okay.
but perhaps on the flap or something I do. So for the same
Okay.
reason, I don't want to clutter up the cover.
Yeah, because I kind of had the same question as her about like if like I didn't want to put all of that because there's like I have three different, like I have the person that wrote the poem, I got the article, and then I've got Chief Seattle. So I felt like that was gonna be like so much to try to even put on like the inside dust jacket, like if I wrote it all.
Yeah.
So I put it in a different section, kind of like about section.
Hmm. I had this exact problem with the book cover that I did. I didn't do the whole book. I just did the cover, the jacket and everything for a book. There were these lawyers, and they were doing an international um, global studies kind of book. And because they had 5 different authors that contributed to it, they wanted all of the authors on the front of the cover. And they all belonged to the same legal organization. So my point was, why don't we put the organization's name on the front and put a more detailed description of each of you guys on the inside flap? And we went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and they didn't want to do that. And I said, okay, so I'll put them all on there. I put them all on there and showed them, and they all went, oh, I see what you mean. It's just too much, because they also had some very, some things about what we wanted on the cover. And so it was an issue. And a lot of times it's hard to, especially for a non-designer, to visualize what that will do, because now it's all competing. That's what this all ends up being. It's what my description earlier of the text over an image does. It's a competition now. And so the more elements you throw in there, the more players there are competing for your attention. And so this is a very, very realistic situation. And there are many ways to solve it. Sometimes it is solved simply by the egos of the people who want their name on the front. And sometimes it's a better design decision that happens. So it's not like there's only one way to do it. So the way you're describing Hatsine on yours sounds to me like it's going to be just fine.
I have another question, sorry. Are we handling the same kind of way, like for our short stories, we're doing like edited by, because we're not the author of that. So for this one, would we do the same thing, edited by? And then if we did illustrate it ourselves, do we also put in edited and illustrated by?
Yes. The difference on this is that, again, sorry for those of you that aren't also in the other class, but in this one, it depends on if you're actually editing. So you might be compiling as opposed to going in and deciding which parts are used and which aren't used, which you have.
I'm not really editing, I'm more compiling.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay. All right, cool. Thank you. Because I keep forgetting to ask that, and it comes up, and I'm like, I'm leaving that till later until I ask.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing that you're probably all, that level, I believe, is where you all are now. I may be incorrect on that. So
I think
I'm
just working on the dust jacket and the finishing up my illustrations.
Okay.
But
so maybe the other thing I can say in general is that if you have, back to my original point, is if you have a printer, to try and do a dummy here, and it doesn't matter what kind of paper it's on at this point, but just to see a physical version of what you've been doing. You can also potentially see how that, at the very least, print them out and staple them together. The next version would be, trying to replicate the kind of binding that you're planning for, to see how the sequence works, to see how things go in the gutter, that kind of thing. Okay. Jasmine, did you have a question there earlier?
Yeah, since we're not really editing it, could we like put compiled by then?
Yes, that's sorry, that's what I meant to be suggesting earlier.
Okay.
Yeah, the word compile probably is going to be more accurate, because you're not picking and choosing from you're well, I've picked this article, I picked this article, I picked this article, or I haven't picked excerpts from different articles. If you are picking excerpts from, that's an editing task. Okay, but if you're using the comments or whatever in their entirety, but just paired with something else, that's compiling. Okay, so now you might be thinking, well, I'm doing a little of both. In some cases, the articles I'm using are really short, so I am using it in its entirety, but this other article is really long and I only picked part of it. Well, then in fact, you don't say compiled and edited. I suppose you could, but that seems kind of cumbersome to me. I would just say edited then, okay, if it's a combination. Gavin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing okay, I guess. I was looking at some of what you said from the comments, not from the comments, from what I sent in as a whatchamacallit, and then also from what you just said. One of the things I do have a question about is from you coming in. I think I'm gonna pull it up. Wrong one. You said
I hope I told the truth.
where the story begins with my father. So I said to me, think
Yeah.
about emphasizing. No, also when their advice continues to the next page, start the top line with the top line of advice on the left side.
Yeah, does that make sense what I'm saying?
No.
Okay, so normally, let's see, let me try and share my screen. It's way easier to do it that way. There we go. And if I got one out here, I can just call it. Oh. Oops. Oh. Okay, so let's put a title in here. Okay, that's fine. So if we went strictly by the text boxes, the pages that are on there, then this text box goes all the way up to the top of the grid, and so does this one. Okay, and I know I'm a little incorrect here in the fact that I'm doing it across 2 pages, and I believe I would not have a new article beginning on the left page. Okay, so this example is true whether it's across 2 pages or across 2 columns or 3 columns on the same page. It's still true. So what I mean by this is if this is the baseline of the first line on this side, then that is in fact where I want this text to begin. So I want it there. Okay, so what that does, again, this could be across 3 columns or 2 columns on the same page. We're not going to see this exact thing because I wouldn't begin an article on the left-hand side. But I'm essentially giving a little, and we did this a little bit, I think, on one of your pieces earlier. I think it was on the Seattle piece with 3 columns, right? So we lowered the columns in the right down to give a little more emphasis to the title. But what it's also doing is it's grouping the story because it's starting at the same point. Okay, now the question could be, okay, so now, fine. So now when I go to the next pages, do I begin the story at this location? And the answer is no. On the next pages, I do take the text all the way up to the top. Does that explain that one? Kevin? Are you muted? I think you might be.
No, I'm replaying it in my head to see if I get it. So like if it's a continuation of this part, then it goes like at the baseline. Then it goes like at the baseline here. But if it's a new
let's do it this way. Okay, so what I really want to do is have the text begin evenly across there.
right.
Okay, as opposed to doing that kind of thing.
Right.
Now, you could say, well, I've seen it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen it that way too. But you should see that by doing it this way, as opposed to that way, there is a distinct difference in terms of the visual importance of the title versus when it's like this versus when they're up on the top, right? You know, versus when they're up there. This seems, for one, and for sure, that it's just crowded in there,
Right.
and filling up all the space. In this case, this space is meaningful. This space is there because it's helping to give more importance to this. It's also helping us to group this and read from the bottom. I go to the same spot that I started up here. I'm not jumping up and down, all of that stuff. So they're little things, but they, you know, this along with the correct dashes and punctuation and everything else, right leading, opening the tracking, the right margins, all of those little tiny things add up to making it a more pleasant reading experience, and a reading experience that I get it when I'm done reading. I don't have to reread it because I missed something in there. All of those things. That's the point, is adding up. So this is just one little thing here with the title.
Yeah, I understand. Because like I don't think mines are like that though, because mines are like actually different paragraphs, and they kind of like all kind of start at the same levels, I guess, when they do start.
Okay, the only difference is when it's on the same page as where the actual title is. So if we went to down here, then then here on like the next page, then the story is going to go back and start up here. The difference would be if I have a new article. It begins on another page. You know, so here's a new story. This one now is going to again drop down to beginning there. So that my previous article is going to end something like this. Here's my new article beginning here, and then these again start down lower. Okay, so well, that's just that thing for all of us, I guess. If you have that situation, that's how you should treat it.
Okay. All right, because I was looking at it and I was like, because I don't see that in mine.
Okay.
So I was just kind of confused. Yeah. But yeah, this makes sense though.
I'm sorry.
I said, but this makes sense though. Like what?
Oh, okay. Okay.
I was just trying to figure out like how it, I guess how it applies to mine, because I wasn't seeing that sort of problem with mine.
Did I make that comment on yours? I did.
Yeah.
Let me re-look and see why I made that comment, and I'll try to clarify it if that's not true.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Mackenzie,
What's up?
what's up? Sup?
The one concern that's popping up for me right now is debating on whether or not to give priority of like it's not called the spine, but like the bending area of the book. Hold on, let me get my dummy. So, kind of rough. But right now I have it set for this like smaller area.
Yeah.
You know, you would actually open it.
Yes.
But then I was thinking, well, since it's also part flip book, do I need to accommodate for like that thumb
Yes.
space and expand it to that?
Yes.
So really when it's bound and everything, it would be approximately this thick.
Could very well be that thick. Yes.
Okay. Well, I mean, I measured my thumb for that, so.
Yeah. And why I said it that way rather than just saying yes, do that. It depends. It depends on the kind of paper.
Yeah.
So typically for a flip book, the paper is a little stiffer than we might normally have. Yeah. There you go. So you could, if you have a variety of papers there, you don't have to even print anything on it, but you could just see how it flips. And I guess I would use as maybe a starting point is think of a deck of cards.
Okay.
You know, and if you have any flip books, you know, that I guess that's another thing, but typically we would more likely have a deck of cards. So you can think of the kind of paper, the way, you know, as a gauge, as a starting point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then it means, okay, if this is the kind of paper I'm using, then that will give you a sense of how much room there you need to grab it to be able to do that thing. I do believe that that more generous amount that you just showed us is a good idea. We'll also see flip books out there where, in fact, they've perfectly bound them. In other words, they're just glued it into the spine, and then we're supposed to flip it. After 4 or 5 times, the pages are falling out, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And of course, they're doing it that way to save cost. So both that increased amount of paper that doesn't seem like a big deal adds up to the total cost of the book. But we're saying that, well, that's justified because if we don't do that, the book's going to fall apart and then it's a waste.
Mm-hmm.
So I think ultimately good design means we're not wasting. We're making decisions because it makes the thing more effective, last longer. That, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're on the right track. I'm glad to see that you're doing the dummies there. That's excellent. Let me see if I can give you any other thoughts here on the paper. Oh yeah, you could actually Google what are some good papers for flip books.
Okay.
You could do something as direct as that, and then through Sappy paper, they're kind of the only ones anymore that will do this. Is send you free samples. So SAPPI.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was telling us about free samples, so I've been collecting them for the past.
Excellent. Okay. Yeah. See, yes. I'm sorry. I think you started that conversation a while ago. Yeah. Thanks.
They're
Mhm.
pretty.
Anything else with your book?
No, that's where I am. And then everything's going to have to change dependent on me changing the margin space.
Okay. Great. Great. Taylor, how about yours?
Hi.
Hi.
I have everything laid out. I'm just doing final tuning. I had a question on the colophon.
Yeah.
I know you brought up just anything that has to do with the making of the book.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was looking back at my other type book from last semester,
Yeah.
and I was looking at what I put in there, and it says like the printer used and the paper used. But if we're not sure of, do we still put that it was made at the university and all of that?
Yes.
Okay.
So if you I believe I put on our assignment page links to Colophon on our website, but if I didn't, you can simply in the search box there put in Colophon, and you'll see some examples and descriptions of what a colophon should contain. But let me talk about it a little bit right now. So a colophon, yes, is the equivalent to production notes. In a book, it's typically at the end rather than the front, which it would be if it was a magazine. And typically, any kind of information that you can supply to us about the creation of the book is what can go into a colophon. There are no strict rules about what a colophon has to contain.
Okay.
Okay, but I think for a colophon to be useful, then it should contain any detail about how the book was made. So that would include the text, and you have to identify this. What is the typeface and font variations that you used for the display type? What is the typeface and font variations that you used for the text type application? So both display and text type. The paper, the method of binding, the software that you use to create it, the computer that you use to create it, the printer that you use to print it. What am I missing here? Where it was, who actually sponsored it or published it? So University of the Pacific makes sense. And in our case, you're also doing it for a specific class. So it makes sense you would put typography 2, fall 2020, so spring 2020.
Okay.
Okay, so all of that information would be examples of what would be normal here. On the other hand, if you had a colophon and simply said the typeface and the paper it was printed on, is that a colophon? Yeah, it's not a good one, but it's a colophon.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Also, I use all three applications: InDesign, Illustrator, and Photoshop.
Excellent.
Would I be putting
Yes.
all three?
Yep. So you say what you used them for. So you used Photoshop to do image editing, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, very good. I think I wasn't in the right view when I started this morning, so I don't know if you were on yet when I started, but I tried to comment back on what people had sent into drafts. I think you had sent me a PDF.
Mhm.
And so the PDFs are difficult for me to open very quickly and get into it. So I'm sorry I didn't comment back on your PDF, but if you could just send it to me as JPEGs,
Okay.
sample pages, then I can deal with that a whole lot easier. Now for the final version, do send me a screen resolution PDF.
Okay.
Okay.
And that's of all the entire layout of all the.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, if you have your cover as a separate document from the InDesign PDF, you can send that to me as a JPEG.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. And maybe one other thing that came up in the other class that I hadn't talked about. Let's say that you have the left inside page is an illustration and the actual story or the title page or whatever begins on the right, which it's supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
When you create a PDF, InDesign is going to move that illustration, which you want on a left-hand page, it's going to move it to a right-hand page and screw everything up for you. Okay? So to prevent that from happening, if you have or want to have an illustration on a left-hand side, when you open it up, then insert a blank left-hand page, excuse me, a blank right-hand page at the very, very beginning. That this is blank. And then the first left-hand page will be your illustration. The first right-hand, or the second right-hand page is where your book begins. And that's simply because of the way InDesign looks at the creation of a PDF from its file. I didn't explain that very well. Did it make sense?
Kind of, yes.
Let me try it again. So if your book, you want to be able to open it, and on the left-hand side have an illustration, and then on the right-hand side, a half title page, or a dedication page, or a table of contents or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in your actual InDesign layout, to make that happen, you have to insert a blank right-hand page. That single page that's all by itself, that needs to be blank. Okay, and then the first spread on the left-hand side would be the illustration.
Okay. This would be before any context, right? It would just be.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, and this is only necessary if you want to have an illustration on the left, right when you open up the book. That's the only time you need to do this.
Okay.
Okay. Alrighty. Asia, how are you doing?
Hello. So I keep wanting to send you drafts, but then I keep forgetting because other projects just keep distracting me. But I finally submitted my draft this morning after you talked about the PDF thing. So it's not in PDF form. So that's good. For the most part, it's done. I think I just have to do a little bit more tweaking and finishing the cover.
Okay. Well, I will try to look at what you and if the rest of you send me new versions here right when we sign off, so you get some comments back as quickly as possible. Okay.
I actually had one question,
Okay.
or that I could think of right now.
Okay.
Is it due tomorrow by midnight or today by midnight? I got confused.
Well, Canvas has been playing little games with me. It's supposed to be Thursday. If any of you have tried to upload and it told you that it was due today or tomorrow, that's incorrect. And I will go back. I did it for our other class where that was an issue. I will look at it for our class as well and make sure that the due date is Thursday, since we're a Tuesday-Thursday class. So it should be Thursday midnight.
Okay. That's a lot of time.
Well, it's a little more time, and it's and I think you guys are all well far enough along that you should be able to meet that deadline.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but if not, please let me know here if there's something that's holding things up.
I have a question, sorry.
Okay.
When I originally got my article for the other voices, I also like copied and pasted when I put that into like a Word document to flow over.
Mhm.
I also had included all of the like, I guess, further reading references that they had in the article at the end.
Cool.
And I had included that in a separate section, which I started on a right page. At the end of it, after the like about the author type sections.
Okay.
So I mean, is that okay to do? So that way, if like somebody did have further questions about like what they were reading, the content on that, because I felt like it was necessary because I kind of split up and broke up some of those things in the article.
Mhm.
So I felt like if they did want to refer back to it, that was like a way to kind of credit their sources. Is
Yeah.
that okay?
Yes, two things. So you're an editor in this case because you're rearranging, you're taking parts out and possibly not using all of the other ones. Even if you were using all of the other articles, you are breaking it up and interspersing it. That's editing.
Okay, so then so I should not say compiling, I should say editing.
Correct.
Okay.
And that hit that flashed in my head a while ago, but I was going to mention it at the end. But yes,
Okay.
that is also editing. So even if you're using those other articles in their entirety, you are interspersing them as a dialogue in this case, and that is editing. So you are an editor, not a compiler.
Okay. All right. But it's okay to put that in, like, because I had it under like a section called I don't even remember what I called it right now. Oh, I called it references and further reading is
Yeah.
what I call it.
Yeah. And so this particular thing also fits into what I was saying earlier about like citations in general.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so the more complete and detailed that is, it gives more validity, it gives more believability, it's more truthful, I guess. So anything that you can do in that direction is a good thing to do. So, sometimes books just refer to it as the bibliography. You could call it for more reading or read more about it or more information, or you can title it anything you'd like.
Okay.
I suppose the traditional title for it though would be like a bibliography or.
Should I title it that then?
Not necessarily, it's up to you. It's about it's what fits in with the overall tone of your book.
Okay.
If the rest of your titles, which are more poetic, I guess I would say, they're provocative. They're not just objective, practical titles.
Mm-hmm.
So it would seem odd if all of a sudden we had just a title for this kind of information that was simply practical, what would I say, more traditional, I guess.
Okay, because I did also include in the about section on the organization and those authors, I also included like, for more information on the organization and like their website. So like if anybody did have, further information about it, like, I don't know if anybody's ever going to read this book, but if anyone ever did, then it would be in there. So
Oh, you know, this is the kind of thing that makes it a book that someone might want to read. This makes it, it raises its its effectiveness.
okay.
Yeah. So all of those things are parts that you can add to the book. You know, I don't think it's right for me to require, you know, bibliographies and indexes and all these other things, because our focus here is on the typographic arrangement of the material.
Yeah.
But in terms of the content being more, reach more people, I guess, and be more without question that is true, or inspire people to look further, then these other parts of a book are real important. And so when you show that in a piece that you've done, you know, that's just that much more impressive.
Okay.
It's a
Well,
good idea.
okay. I just wanted to make sure it was okay to put that in there. So
Sure. Yeah. Thanks. Any other one?
Yeah. Real quick. For the cover. Okay, so for mine, like I said, in my message I sent to you, I was thinking about doing like a stab bound with uh, a leather.
Cover?
Yes, with a leather cover. Oh my goodness. So like,
Just 20 questions with you.
I know. So I don't really have to. I don't really have to do like another like full uh, full cover page thing where I have to, because
I think I understand your question. So your cover is going to be leather
right,
that you're going to tool or stamp into the leather.
right,
Okay, so that design that's going to go on the leather is your cover.
okay,
It's just not printed in paper, but you should
right,
still do that design in paper, like you would if you were going to print it to paper.
okay,
Okay,
like
and
you like sketch that out or
sketch it out, but it needs to look. It needs to be precise. It's just like if you were printing it to paper. Okay.
okay,
Okay. Now, if it means that the design on the front cover that's going to be stamped is a hand-drawn illustration, then yeah, you still do it as exactly as you would do to tool it into the leather. Okay, and when we get to that point, have you done this before? Have you worked with leather? Okay, so there's a variety of ways that you can get your design onto the leather to then work with it. So you can do very depending upon the leather. You know, if it's tanned hide or if it's rough or what, you know, we don't know what that is yet, but uh, there are different ways you can transfer your design to the leather. Drawing on it directly is probably not something I would suggest, because you know, when you start erasing and things like that on the leather, it messes up the surface, and you will always see that. So you want to have your design pretty refined and then transfer it to the leather. And again, when we get to that point and you have the leather you want to go to, then I can help you with how to make that happen. On the other hand, there's plenty of YouTube, you know, DIY kinds of things about how to get a design onto leather, and I certainly would look at those. But I'm a real fan of marker transfer. And I think I showed those to you guys, right? With the colorless blender. So, and you can do that onto leather very easily. Yeah, so that's one way. It's not the only way by far.
I stamped leather before, and I just also, to make sure that I didn't like ruin the design before I put it on there and stamped it wrong, I actually did the design on a really thin paper, and then I put that in between to stamp it on there so that I got it in the precise spot, and it seemed to work pretty well. It was almost like having like a template.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And actually, you brought up another possibility here is, so if you're tooling it, it's putting a drawing perhaps that you've done and transferring it to leather. If you're stamping it, it means that you've got some very, very specific dye stamps that you are putting into the leather. And you can do both, combination of it, or you can just do one or the other, but they are two slightly different techniques. And yeah, so all this can work for sure. Your basic question though is, do you need to do a cover page design? And the answer to that one is yes. It's just that that design is the one that you end up putting in leather as opposed to printing it to paper. Okay, and it might be the type of design that you do print to paper as a template, like Adsina is describing, to then put over the leather and use it to stamp into the leather. It could be that too. Okay, I definitely would have, do you have leather right now? Okay, so there's a variety of places, to look for that. You can go to, once you can do it, at any of the craft stores, Michael's, Hobby Lobby, that kind of thing. But you can also order it online. Tandy Leather is an old company that supplies leather. But you may also have a resource from that, just you happen to know. But there's a variety of places on that. There is there's a different kinds of leather, again, except designs differently depending upon how they've been treated. So you'll want to be aware of that. Again, we can talk more about this when we get further along.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
There is one, I don't think you met him, but Kyle Sabatini, Sabatino, he did a leather stamped cover for this assignment a couple years ago. And I believe that that's one of the examples I put on the page. And he stamped his. And then he sewed the edges with a leather cord. Okay, anything else here that you're wondering about? Anybody? Okay. All right. Well, I want to repeat a few things that I mentioned here for my other classes, and that is I really am. I mean, you guys are here. You've been here all along. It is a very responsible thing to do. It's the right thing to do. I absolutely appreciate it. I think that's a good trait to have personally. It tells me that you guys have developed your own routines for each day, and you're following through. That is impressive. This is not an easy situation to maintain that kind of thing, but it doesn't go unnoticed. So that's going to serve you well. I can't overemphasize that. I think in terms of what you've been doing with the actual assignments, that is also impressive. Again, even in the best of times, it's hard. This particular project, I always really like to see the actual resulting objects, the books themselves. So we just need to hang on to the files, don't just have them be one more file that's sitting out on your desktop, please. Organize those things, have backups, have more than one copy. And we'll get to put them all together sometime, hopefully in the fall. But my main thing right now is that I'm sorry that we couldn't finish out the semester together in the classroom. Um, but I'm glad you guys have hung in there on this. That's good. It looks to me like as things keep changing and developing along that, and we will have a department meeting this afternoon, but we had a chair meeting last week. We'll have one again on Thursday. It looks to me like the university is moving towards at least some kind of on-campus classes in the fall. What that will exactly look like is still being decided, but I can let you know that it looks, unless something dramatically changes, that we'll be on campus in some way, shape, or form in the fall. Those classes will have some aspect of social distancing involved with them. The classrooms are not going to look the same as they are at studios, the same as the way they did when you left. For example, the computer lab might be scattered up and down the hallway. So things are definitely in the works here.
What about our lockers?
Yeah, all sorts of things. Okay. I mean, it might even be as radical as moving the lockers into the lab and the lab out into the hallway. It might be that the lab gets instead separated between the seminar room and the lab, and the lockers can stay where they're at. We may be having a lot more meetings outside. Either drawing or painting will most likely move to the sculpture building for the fall, since there isn't a class in there in the fall. There's a whole bunch of just, things we're trying to work out. But I guess why I'm telling you this is we won't be back to normal versions before spring break this coming fall. I can tell you that one for sure. I'll be asking you guys as we move forward here, maybe later in the summer even, as you've had time to, all of us, to sit back from this a bit, and I may be asking you to let me know what you liked best about our kind of triage version of classes here for the finished up fall. We'll have much more time to plan, of course, to finish up classes here this spring. We'll have much more time to plan for the fall. And since some version of this will exist in the fall, I'll probably be asking your input on what you thought did work well, what you thought didn't work well. Let's not do that anymore. But what you thought was helpful, so that we can plan a better version for the fall. But I'm not going to do that right now. You don't need to focus on that now. So I think that's pretty much all I have to say right now. I'm going to check and make sure the assignment deadline is in fact for Thursday. That is when it's due, not tomorrow.
I have a question, but it doesn't have to do with the class.
Sure. Uh-huh.
I saw the email about the petitions, and I wanted to know if you were able to send it in yet.
All petitions were held up for a while. Because I think they were changing how that was going to go forward because of I can't remember if the message that I put on there included the committee or not, but there's a committee involved with it, and they were deciding where those petitions would go through and whether or not they were going to keep the fees attached to them. So while that was being decided, I held up and didn't send anything in. That just got decided yesterday, and then I posted it for all for advisees, and essentially, I think all of you are my advisees, right? I feel like you are. So in the advisee announcements, this is where that our post is, I guess, that Jasmine is referring to. And some of you had petitions that you were waiting to see if it would go through to be able to do an overload. So now that that decision has been made, I can go ahead and get those to go through. The other reason that is out there is that I don't think this applies to any of you, but you might have a friend who who was struggling and with some class or something. And so the option is out there to change the grading from a grade to pass no credit kind of option. So if you have a friend who feels, who's really, I mean, the stress has been too much to really do how they would normally be able to handle a class, and they want to opt for the pass no credit, draw their attention to that announcement. Again, it's on the advisee announcements, because that's an option. And of course that requires a petition. And so the petition process attached to that is also described there. Okay. All right. Anything else related to anything? Doesn't have to be our assignment. Okay, well then, hopefully you all got the message, and so it's a reminder that on Thursday, we'll have a all department ceremony. It's traditionally, it's when the seniors, there's a senior awards part to it, but this particular one is important because it's a transition for us as a department. And of course, just some way to bring a bit of closure to the semester, because we're just scattered all over the place. So hopefully you can all make that one on Thursday. Okay. All righty, then I'll sign off for right now, and we'll talk later. Okay. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.